Welcome back to Contacts. We are joined today with Jason Smith, head track and field coach at Palma and Notre Dame, fellow UC Davis Aggie alumni. Really excited to have you here today, Coach. Looking forward to this conversation.
As well am I. Good to be with a fellow Aggie and former coach together at Palma and my daughter's alma mater at Stevenson. So we're covering it all.
Yes, indeed. So let's jump right in. Can you take us through your background as a coach? How did you end up in this profession, and what was the process for you landing your first job and then any subsequent coaching jobs as you navigate the year-to-year adventure that this is?
Great question. I mean, I think probably for a lot of us, right, it just starts in our own athletic career, which is really probably how it started with me in high school. Maybe not thinking that I was actually going to coach down the road, because we all have our opinions of some coaches and others. But I think where it really, went to Davis, and I originally wanted to play football, but my 5'11", 175 frame that was a nose guard and tight end at Palma High School wasn't going to be doing that at Division II at the time. And anyhow, just learning how to be a safety or whatever, I was pretty much a meathead on the line. I was just going to leave it there. But did do track and field for a year until I got injured. And I think through the process of always being an athlete, when I didn't necessarily fulfill what I thought I could have done in college, when I got out of it, it was natural to stay in athletics when we got back to Salinas. So, really the opportunity, I graduated in spring of '92 from Davis, and basically myself and, Dave Martinez and Phil Jamonko and Eric Esker, three guys I graduated with, we got offered to coach the freshman football team at Palma. So, went from there. We did that for a season, which I loved and enjoyed. I did need to quickly figure out how to filter my mouth a little bit as I had my very first practice, and decided at the end everyone needed a little bit of a motivation. And as I let the words fly, I soon then noticed all the freshman parents that were lined up on the fence, and I got called into the principal's office the day later. So I'm like, I didn't even do that in high school. So, did football and helped out assistant at the varsity level for a couple of years, running scout team. I mean, I like being with the guys and in there, and that was good. But track and field has been, one of my loves for forever. And Steve Clayton, former athletic director, asked, needed some help in high jump. He was doing that. So he was the head coach at the time, and asked if I'd be interested. I said, sure. I did that for a couple of years. And then he said, hey, would you be interested in being head coach? And I really honestly hadn't considered it. And part of this is, right, I'm not on campus like a lot of coaches, but how does this work into the work schedule? So although I love football and would have loved to have been coaching football forever, it's during our harvest, which is the busiest time, and it just really doesn't work very well. But
for those that don't know, that are listening, you are a winemaker.
Yeah, so we're a 50-year company of family growing wine grapes and making wine, and are local here in the Salinas Valley in Monterey County. So yes, that's definitely what pays the bills. I don't think coaching's quite done that as of yet. So, but so that was the question. And basically what I told Coach Clayton at the time was, I'll give it 5 years, because I had kids that were young and that were about that time out from high school. So I knew 5 years, and then I knew they were going to be in athletics. I wanted to be involved and be able to go to games and whatever. So that's 20 years ago. And it kind of rolled in and, just continued there. And really that's what I've been doing besides some, side stuff, being able to coach kids in flag football. And luckily I can't coach baseball. So it all worked out.
Awesome. Great backstory. I'm assuming that Brother Dunn, the patriarch there, gave you the "don't be a jerk" speech at a little higher level when you got called into the office.
It was so he actually, I didn't never have, he came on as principal the year after I graduated. So I hadn't really had any action, but yeah, I got called in more than once, I think, but always good natured. And he knew my heart was in the right place, just needed to clean up the delivery a little bit. So yes, got a little Brother Dunn talk every once in a while.
Awesome. I really enjoyed the 2 years I got to spend working with him. When you finally took over, right, and Coach Clay was able to convince you that this would be a good fit, what did you realize very quickly that you still needed to figure out?
And probably very quickly, I didn't figure it out. It came a little longer, but probably the number one thing is you got all these ideas in your head of how you're going to do it. And, specifically in track and field where you have lots of different events to learn. And I knew I wanted to hire, bring on some friends, coaches, former athletes, and friends of mine. And I guess the simple thing was you got a plan in your head of how it's all going to go. And then you realize you got to teach them how to walk, before you even run, before you even jump, so it's the full process, which I think hit me pretty hard because I was kind of in on an individual basis, coaching high jump at the time and maybe helping with the hurdles a little. And then the movement to, oh man, we've got all these disciplines, some of which I'm comfortable with and some I'm not, which has turned out to be one of my main goals every year is just to have I've been able to do it for 20 years because I have an awesome staff. And there's core people who have been with me for 10 to, Greg Lane's been with me the whole time for 20 years coaching the jumps. But the need for help and delegation was super important.
Well, I think that's the lesson there. As the quicker we can become self-aware of our own blind spots, our own strengths and weaknesses, and then make a choice, I need to go and grow that area and make it a strength, or I need to hire somebody to fill that spot. And I think that's really hard because when you're young, you think you can do everything by yourself. And as you mature, either you figure out how to do everything by yourself, or you realize I need to find people that can do this better than me so that our kids and our athletes get the best service they can get.
One of my favorite little quotes from actually area soccer coach, old Ralph Bozo at Geno's. Mm-hmm. And I was just talking to him one day about the success of his businesses. Mm-hmm. But he goes, "Hey, I just always try to go out and hire people smarter than I am." So, and it fits right into that, right? Like I am not a guru in the distance deal. I'm a sprint hurdle guy, but I know people. Yep. And then you still have to blend in the overall philosophy of what you want your team to be. Mm-hmm. But give them the reins. It's another one my dad always used to say, give people the authority and responsibility, and then get after it. Yep. And if you got to pull back the reins a little bit and say, "Hey, I see where you're going, I want to do a little different twist here. You learn over time when to step in, how to step in, and how to help people grow, which is a big part.
Yeah. I think the other benefit to having what many would consider a larger staff than is necessary, right? So if you think back to when we were younger and the coaching staff on a football team was 3 guys, and now it might be 8 to 10. And how do you reconcile that? And as an athletic director now, what I have found is the more people I can add that add value to the students, the better we are, right? Because you might not connect with them. I might not, but my assistant coach might. And that's going to be the mentor that serves them while they're a student and later on in life. As you know, the number of calls we get later checking in or asking for advice
Right.
way after the fact. And it might not be us that is the best person for that.
Yeah, and honestly, I probably realized after doing this for so long, the difference of coaching in a private school and a public school. The coaching isn't different, but the politics and the administrative work. So I have been head coach for Palma and Notre Dame for 20 years. The advantage of that is I also had 2 budgets, and so I've, for probably the last 15 years, taken my head coaching stipend and volunteered it. Yeah, so I take all of, so I got 2 there, and so I have a staff of normally 12 to 14 coaches, and we talk about it, right? Like most are there, all of us do it because we love it, but hey, you got to travel from Monterey and you want to make sure you get $1,000 to cover gas or whatever, we kind of split it up and make it work. But then back to your point, right? We've had some great success bringing back former athletes, who, like, some of them, I mean, remember Marcus Washington, who as an athlete was a great athlete, but more quiet and kind of, introvert. He's awesome as a coach, right? Like he related with the kids. He actually understood what was being taught to him at the time and then could translate it. And then when you have someone like Coach Lane who can, give you the parameters to stay within, a real advantage of having a staff that kind of, especially as we get older, we're covering different generations and stuff like that. So, I think your point to letting them have a sounding board, we've got, 3 or 4 female coaches, which has always been really important. I mean, I'll never forget Coach Lane coming over to me and he's all, Jay, I got an issue. And I said, well, what's up? Yeah, what can I, well, we're doing these drills in the sand, and this one girl keeps landing, and her thong keeps showing, and all the guys, and I don't know what I'm like. I'll get Coach Shannon and send her over to appropriately address what the attire should be, or so you. Yep. Different stories and things that we laugh about, and but like, how do you deal with those things in an appropriate way?
Need help. We don't have the answers all the time. And to Marcus's point, or the reference to Marcus, he's great. I've got to watch him coaching youth football for the last couple of years because my son plays, and I've tried to get him to jump ship over there, but he lives in Salinas still, so it's too much of a commute for him. But eventually, maybe I'll convince him. As you think about your program, right, holistically over the last 20 years, even to now, and how you've shifted and adjusted, what would you say is the best thing you do as a program that has the largest ripple effect on your culture?
It's probably changed over the years. Really, I am kind of a football guy at heart, and so I've always kind of taken that team mentality into an individual sport. So, my main goal is always to try to get everyone, rowing the same way. It's still, from an actual winning or championship aspect, it's how do we get to the final goal, right? Like I can go back to JV football of getting to the top of the mountain and stuff like that, as an athlete, and how that motivated me. And like, how do you do this in an individual sport, but make it a team deal? So, which the advantage, the interesting thing in an individual sport like track, right? You only got one winner, but when you get to the championship level, you're placing anywhere from 6 to 8, and that can matter. So there's always been hey, everyone counts, right? Like, our very first championship we won, we didn't win because of guys who got 1, 2, and 3. We won because of the guys that got 4, 5, and 6, which was awesome, right? It just kind of brought together how much it matters. And you get into tenths of a second, and I've done little motivational things where it's just funny because in track, you'll read a measurement or whatever, and you might be the 12th. I mean, this is a trick I've done for many years, right? You're going into the championships and you're barely in the top 10, and you're like, well, I have no chance. And then I pull out my favorite little prop, the old ruler, right? Like well, that's 2 inches, right? Like that's 2 inches, right? You're number 10 in the league because you didn't hit the board. Like, so, I mean, my number one motto is believe. I guess it's good during Christmas time, but the getting kids to believe in themselves is by far and away the driving goal of what we've tried to do from the team aspect. And then I think probably in the last 5 to 6 years, it's really been a focus of how much sport in general translates to life. And so there's been a shift of failures and accountability and responsibility, and oh, by the way, this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. And this how that so that transfer of things, right? Like we can go back and think about it as athletes. It all makes sense now, but I don't think no one addressed me at that age saying, hey, this is what life is going to be like and whatever. So there's been probably the last 5 years more of a connection of the dots for our coaching staff to the kids of how this awful workout translates into your future success. So
absolutely.
Ready.
I often talk with our athletes about why we use sports and how it's a vehicle to teach leadership and how to be part of something bigger than yourself. And I think that your approach to creating your culture speaks exactly to that. It also leaves me curious, as a guy that used to coach football, and that's where you got your start, and that was your primary sport and your love. What you have been able to learn watching other coaches and other sports as they then can inform your own practice, even if they may or may not have anything to do with track.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I've heard this in some of your podcasts and whatever, right? Like the day I stopped learning is the day I should be 6 feet under. I don't have an ego that I know it all, and especially in our world of just sports, right? The amount of information that's out there now of how to get better and whatever without PEDs and other enhancements. But yeah, so I mean, I guess for me, I can think of a specific example, and you and I were talking about warm-ups before we started here today. I got our warm-up routine from watching, my daughter and I were back in North Carolina at a soccer tournament. and we were at the NCAA Women's Final Four.
Mhm.
I watched their, active warm up, which was basically, just going up 12 yards, doing different exercises, whatever. From that day forward, that is how we've done our warm ups. I'm like, this is brilliant, right? Like, it's active warm up. It's not the static stretching. It's not so, I think there's individual drills and skills you can pick up from those type of things. And then I'm just always, I like to see what the winners do, right? Like how are they motivating, or how are they organizing, or what is it that separates them? I mean, first of all, disclosure, I am a Dallas Cowboy fan, and I don't know why, and I'm sorry. But I have been so, you should definitely, but the Belichick Brady thing, like, that New England team you should not have a dynasty in this day and age. And so, I've read books, and, there's definitely a system and the stuff that they've done or whatever, but like, a lot of people don't like Bill Belichick because he works them too hard, and it's too much. So I think you can take different models, and then they got to work into who you are and how you want to put them out. But, I think continuous learning is the name of the game.
Mm-hmm. Well, you brought up that football analogy, and I'll point back to another analogy, say the Miami Heat, right? And the Riley culture, and how it's not a fit for everyone. And you have to be the right athlete to go into that and thrive, because it's such a different level than everybody else expects on what the work ethic looks like. And the connection to a high school coach like us is you have to be yourself. You have to know what hill you're going to die on, and you have to let your athletes opt in or out to that. And as much as we need to support and help nurture them through whatever the transition might be, it may not be for everyone, right? We want to try to cast a wide net, and at the same time, you have to be who you are, or the imposter syndrome is just going to overtake you at some point.
Right. And I think that's one of the best pieces of advice. I had a girl years ago who made it into the finals in the high jump at Notre Dame at the California State meet. Like, just a total shocker. Things all came together at trials, and it got cold, and people whatever, she got in. But I'd come into the season, frankly, nervous. Like, I like coaching high jump, but this was a gal, who's jumping 5'6", and, college scholarship material. And I was afraid, like, I need to know more, like, I got on, and I don't want to screw it up for this kid.
Right.
And so here we are at the, state finals, and she's doing all right. And I'm standing next to this coach from Stockdale High School, had, some incredible, he'd been around for a while. I didn't know him, but we just kind of started chatting it up. And I kind of told him this story about, man, I've been working really hard with her. I didn't want to blow it for her and whatever. I said, but it's been frustrating that she, didn't necessarily care as much or didn't work as hard. And so his great piece of advice was, you can't want it more than they want it. And that, like, that was a huge one for me in coaching, right? Because, we come across talented athletes, and, or even, who knows, maybe an average athlete that can be so much more, but they won't put in the work, and they they won't absorb it, they won't get there. But when I finally resigned myself to, okay, I can't want it more than them, which, it's like the line, when I stop yelling at you or talking to you, that's a bad sign, right? Like, I've given up.
Yep.
So, which, of course, as educators and coaches, we never want to do. Mm-hmm. But you can lead a horse to water. At some point, that's another one. You get what you tolerate. So,
and I don't think we ever get to the point where we're completely throwing in the towel, but to your point of you can't want it more than them, we're just offering up suggestions at that point. If it's a continuous pattern of them not, I don't even want to say not being coachable, but I don't have another word. It's sometimes it's just a matter of, okay, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. You've made a choice clearly to continue doing what you're doing. And, you know, I think we're going to coexist, and I'm going to be supportive in the way that I can't want it more than you.
And I think you bring up a good point, you know, with life, right? Like when something, for me, when something goes wrong, I'm looking here first, right? Like, what did I have to do with this situation or whatever? I mean, you know, it may be minimal, it may be the whole thing, but, you know, and that's been a growth, maturity thing of owning your own stuff and really, right? The blame game isn't going to get anywhere. And I think, you know, and this is, I think a lot of us do it in coaching, obviously, but like pushing buttons is my favorite thing, right? Like how am I going to get this individual to perform, or how am I going to get the team, you know, what do I got to do? And we do try things and fail, and we do, you know, and you know, I had one of the best athletes, track athletes at Palma ever, who we never got there, and it may have cost us a CCS championship when it was all said and done. But you know, that same kid came back to me a year ago, 2 years ago, and you know, we shook hands, and he apologized, and I apologized, and you know, we kind of came to, you know, he was immature, maybe I was immature, and how do we grow from it?
Right.
So,
absolutely. So that's a great segue into my next question, which is, how has your approach changed during your career in regards to coaching?
you know, I mean, I think it kind of, I'm sure you hear this from, I've heard it in some of your deals, right? When you're younger, and it was, we hadn't had a lot of success in winning any championships at Palma, and you know, or Notre Dame, and then we kind of got you know, we had a 7-year run between the two schools of winning a championship, and it actually got kind of, the system got normal, and I think, as again, I think it goes back to the coaching philosophy of changing for me, being, how do we help these kids grow outside of the sport, and what other dots can we connect? You know, I think I listened to Jeff's, you know, deal, and he talked about relationships. You know, I think, you know, for me, that's pushing the button thing. Like, the relationship has always been, especially in the individual sport, and you know, for track kids, and it's, you know, I just don't think about it back then, but for them, they, like, you're on the stage, right? You're not hiding on a basketball court or a volleyball court or a soccer field. It's like, you got to run 100 meters in front of everybody, and only one guy's going to win, right? Risk failure or whatever. So I think part of that shift then has also been embracing failure, not being afraid to take risks, realizing the more work we put in preparation, the more we'll minimize some of those failures and risks, but they're going to be there, right? I mean, we're in COVID. We walk outside today and get it. I mean, it's going to be there, but you can prepare yourself in the right way to minimize that.
Yes. And I read this book early on in the summer that Annie Duke wrote. She's a professional poker player, or was. Now she's, you know, on the speaker circuit. And her book is awesome. If anyone wants to read it, it's called Thinking in Bets. And the basic premise is, we tend to take a backwards evaluation to our decision making based on the result. And we prioritize that a good result means it was a good decision, and it discounts the luck that may have come into that, right? And often we don't achieve success, but the probability determination and the decision making was right. It just bad result. And I think that's been something I've been processing for the last few months that speaks to what you just said in regards to the failure often is a greater window into growth than the success window, because we often don't dig as deep to see what happened. And I think that's a really good lesson. And thanks for bringing that up. We talked about this briefly before we started recording, and I shared that this is kind of a new question I've been playing around with, but what have you most recently changed your mind on from a coaching standpoint?
Having a season? Oh, it is an interesting question. I think, again, I think it kind of goes back into the age thing and the growth and where we're at in our lives and what maybe that winning isn't as important, which which it isn't, but I don't know, it's just really weird, right? There's something, everyone doesn't get a medal. And I believe firmly in, there's winners and losers, because again, that is what life is. But where can we grow? How can we help kids develop physically, mentally, and move that needle. So I was going somewhere else with that too, but and honestly, and we talked about this a little bit before we started, right? The COVID thing's been very difficult. It's because you want to plan and you want to, I don't want to let down the kids. Mm-hmm. But we're not allowed to do anything. So, so it's been that, and frankly, for me, it's been, we, thank God, got in one dual meet in March, at Hollister's new facility. That was awesome. And I am super grateful that we at least had that in, but, I think the introspective of balance and time off and whatever, right? And this is a COVID thing that I think is a 2020 thing, mm-hmm. that's gonna stick with people. Mm-hmm. Where are we at with everything? Where, how much do we need to do, right? Like, there's a part of me that when this goes back to normal, mm-hmm. it's like, I know my February 1st to June 1st is, at work at 5:30 and home at 6:30 when practice is done, and weekends and whatever. So I guess I'm not sure exactly if I'm answering your question, but I will say this to that, right? Like, you got to listen to yourself and where you're at in life, and is it time? Is it not time? And figure those things out. So.
Yeah, you did answer it. You answered it almost in a council circle sort of way by telling some stories that made it clear what you were getting at, which is you've changed your mind, air quotes, about the need for introspection and the need for constant evaluation versus what many of us do as we're younger and trying to get through this. It's like, no, I have this recipe, I'm gonna plug and play it, and the next time it's going to be different, and that's not the case, right? The group you have in front of you may be very different than the one that you had before. And it's up to you now as the coach to figure out how to put the student at the center of the equation and do right by them. So, and meet them where they are, right? So I think, right. Yeah, you did answer it. Last question. If you were starting over today, what would you do differently? And maybe you wouldn't do anything differently because that, provided the growth that you needed at that time. But what advice would you give your younger self?
Uh, Probably my number one word that I've worked on in the last 5 years is listen.
Mhm.
Listen more. I think, back to even maybe what we were just saying, right? Like you're going, you got a plan, you got this, that, or whatever. I'm a talker.
Mhm.
Um, Shut up and listen,
Mhm.
and then see what you hear, and where that's at. So I think you know, I probably talked too much back then and didn't listen, and now I listen more and find the right things. How can I push that same button with less words or less action? And right, I mean, it's just experience, maturity. Whether it's in our coaching lives, our family lives, our working lives. You yeah.
Well, I think the wisdom there, and I really like your answer, is that the coaching dynamic has shifted over the years. And many people will say this generation of kids is soft and this, that, and the other thing. And I look at it differently. I look at it from the standpoint of the kids have a lot to offer if we give them an opportunity and we look behind the curtain versus, in the old days, it was like, this isn't a democracy, it's a dictatorship, right? And now it's still not a democracy, but we're going to make final decisions, but with input from all of our stakeholders, which then leads you again to figure out that, hey, fair's not equal. I may have to coach this kid this way and this kid this way in order to get the best out of them. And I think that's a great answer. And listening is the only way to figure that out.
You just jogged probably one of my biggest learning lessons, as a young coach is you really want to come in and here's the game plan. Here's how we're doing things. Let's go. And it gets into my push button thing as well. But man, every kid learns in a different way. And so if I had maybe known that earlier on more, where there's some people I can just tell and they do it. Some people have to see it and hear it. Some need video. Some need a pat on the back. Some need a kick in the butt. That so I guess I've talked about it throughout the course of this with pushing buttons, but that's it's the art of coaching, right? I mean, here's the playbook. Go figure it out, right? So that's
Yep.
yeah, that is that little piece I would tell myself way back when, I think.
Yep. Great way to end. And I'll wrap that up in a bow by saying, on top of your art of coaching comment, it's like medicine. There's the science of medicine and there's the art of medicine. And those doctors that are the best practitioners at the art of medicine while combining the science have the most success. And coaching is no different. Thank you for sharing that. It was really, really good soundbite to end on. Looking forward to seeing you on the other side of COVID at some point and catching up in person.
You got it, Justin. Thanks for the opportunity, and have happy holidays, and go Pirates.
Yes, sir.